Joining me now here in Washington is Senator Ted Cruz. And Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Chris, good to be with you.
Let's start with the breaking news. Iran, as we've just reported, has released those 4 Americans. At least 3 of them have cleared Iranian airspace. And the Iran nuclear deal went into effect, which means that the U.S. and other Western countries have started lifting sanctions, releasing billions of dollars to Iran. What's your reaction to both?
Well, listen. Praise God that the prisoners are coming home, that the Americans are coming home. In particular, millions of believers across the world have been lifting up Pastor Saeed Abedini in prayer and speaking out for his case. And so we celebrate their coming home. Jason Razian, Amir Hekmati, the 4th individual, we celebrate all of them coming home. I spoke yesterday briefly to Nagme, Pastor Saeed's wife, who I've gotten to know very well. And we're all very grateful he's coming. But at the same time, this deal is a really problematic deal. And it reflects a pattern we've seen in the Obama administration over and over again of negotiating with terrorists and making deals and trades that endanger U.S. safety and security. This deal has a lot of things in common with the Bo Bergdahl deal, where in exchange for Bo Bergdahl, someone now facing court-martial, we released 5 senior Taliban terrorists. In this instance, this deal to bring back Americans who were wrongly imprisoned, we released 7 terrorists who had helped Iran with their nuclear program, and we agreed not to prosecute another 14 terrorists for doing the same thing. That's 21 terrorists helping Iran develop nuclear weapons that they intend to use to try to murder us. And I think it's a very dangerous precedent, because the result of this, every bad actor on earth has been told, go capture an American. If you want to get terrorists out of jail, capture an American, and President Obama is in the let's make a deal business. That's a really dangerous precedent.
It wasn't the only dealing that we had with Iran this last week. Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized 10 U.S. Navy sailors, and they released this video showing those sailors on their knees. And here was your reaction at the first debate.
Give you my word, if I am elected president, no serviceman or servicewoman will be forced to be on their knees, and any nation that captures our fighting men and women will feel the full force and fury of the United States of America.
Now, Senator, I think it's fair to say all Americans were outraged to see that video of Americans on their knees. On the other hand, the Iranians did release the sailors in 14 hours. You still would release what you call the full force and fury of the U.S. military against Iran for that incident?
Let's be clear. Any nation that captures our military officers, captures our soldiers, should face serious repercussions. And the reason Iran felt free to do that, to seize those ships and to humiliate those sailors.
In this particular case, what would you have done? I mean, they were, I'm not saying it was right, but they were released in 14 hours. You still would have taken action?
They were released in 14 hours, but the only reason they were seized is because of the weakness of Barack Obama. The Obama-Clinton foreign policy leading from behind. Our enemies are laughing at us. The days after seizing our sailors and parading them on television to humiliate them. Look, those images were propaganda from Khamenei. Within hours of that, John Kerry and President Obama are profusely thanking Khamenei for letting our sailors go after they had wrongly captured them and tried to humiliate them. And now they're trying to send $150 billion to Khamenei. It is the direct result of the weakness of this presidency. But there is good news, which is the fastest thing that can change with a new president is foreign policy. It's worth remembering this same nation, Iran, in 1981 released our hostages the day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office.
But threatening full force and fury is not the first time that you've used very sharp military rhetoric, which has been controversial. Here's how you said you would handle another threat.
We will have a president who will make clear we will utterly destroy ISIS. We will carpet bomb them into oblivion.
But, Senator, carpet bombing against ISIS would never work. ISIS is embedded in civilian populations in major cities. And if I may, I want to put up this statement here by Bob Scales. He's one of the leading U.S. military thinkers, former head of the Army War College. He said, carpet bombing, that's just another one of those phrases that people with no military experience throw around.
Well, look, I will apologize to no one with how vigorous I will be winning the war on terror, defeating radical Islamic terrorism. We will start by having a president willing to acknowledge our enemy, say it by its name, which President Obama and Hillary Clinton refused to do. And you want to know what carpet bombing means? Yesterday was the 25th anniversary of the beginning of Desert Storm. In 1991, we had roughly 8,000 planes. Today we have 4,000. Our Air Force has dropped in half. In 1991, we had 529 ships in our Navy. Today we have 272. It's dropped nearly in half. In 1991, we had over a third more soldiers in our Army. And we were launching 1,100 air attacks a day. We were carpet bombing them. And after 37 days of 1,100 air attacks a day, our troops went in a day and a half and mopped up the remnants of the Iraqi army, because that's the effect of carpet bombing. You know what we're doing now? We're doing between 15 and 30 air attacks
There's a big difference. First of all, military people will tell you we didn't carpet bomb in Kuwait in the Gulf War, that we did precision striking. In addition, if I may, the Iraqi army was all massed by itself in the Kuwaiti desert. We're now talking about ISIS soldiers who are not massed. They're embedded in Mosul. They're embedded in Raqqa with civilians. But if I may, sir, let me move on to...
Hold on. If you're going to make a point, let me respond to it.
Okay, but go ahead. I would like to ask you about some of your votes, though, and not the rhetoric.
If you're going to make a point, let me respond to it.
Go ahead, sir.
Which is, right now, our rules of engagement, what we're saying, 15, 20 attacks a day, it's photo op foreign policy. So we're not taking out the oil fields. We're not taking out, for example, we saw recent reports about Jihadist University, where they're training jihadists. Why isn't that building rubble? We're not using overwhelming air power. You know, in 1991, we had 2,000 planes there launching this air attack. We have about 200 right now fighting against ISIS. And the difference is we do not have directed, concentrated effort, because this president pretends like this enemy doesn't exist, like these are isolated lone wolves. He gives this State of the Union that is a state of denial, where he says, gosh, you know, ISIS is a bunch of guys in pickup trucks. No. They are a serious terrorist force that has declared war on us. We can defeat them, but we can't defeat them if the president is unwilling to do so. And as president, I will defeat ISIS. We will utterly destroy them, and it takes a commander-in-chief directing our forces to do that.
Let's talk about your record in the Senate. Sure. You have voted the last 3 years in a row against the Defense Authorization Act. And while you attack President Obama for failing to observe the red line and go after Assad for the use of chemical weapons, in fact, back in 2013, you opposed giving the president that authority.
Oh, okay. All right. So you got two questions there. Do you want to talk about the NDAA or Syria? Happy to talk about either one.
I think they're both of a pattern, sir.
No. Well, let's talk about them one at a time. Let's talk about Syria. In Syria, my view on foreign policy is every aspect of foreign policy, every use of military power, should be directed to the vital national security interest of America. The problem with Syria, when President Obama wanted to engage in a unilateral attack against Assad, I kept an open mind at first. I said, all right, let's hear the commander-in-chief tell us how this advances our vital national security. President Obama was unable to do so. They vacillated between points of incoherence. At one point, John Kerry said the objective was to launch a, quote, unbelievably small attack. Essentially more photo op foreign policy, a press release. That doesn't make any sense. The question I asked over and over again, both in public hearings and in private hearings, was, if you succeed, if you topple Assad, how do we stop radical Islamic terrorists? How do we stop al-Qaeda or al-Nusra or ISIS from taking over Syria?
I do not want to interrupt, and I very respectfully, but I do want to cover some more ground. So your answer is you didn't think it was effective.
It's not not ineffective. It would have hurt our interest to give Syria to ISIS.
But
hurts U.S. national security interests.
You supported, or you opposed rather, giving him the authority to observe the red line. What about?
But why?
But if I met, well. What about the 3 times in a row that you voted against the Defense Authorization Act?
All right, that's an altogether separate issue.
I understand.
Well, you just said they were tied together, but all right, you want to talk about the Defense Authorization Act? So I have voted against it because when I campaigned for Senate, I promised the people of Texas that I would not support a Defense Authorization Act that has within it language authorizing the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. I have supported over and over again with each Defense Authorization Act an amendment that Mike Lee and Dianne Feinstein have done together that would say If you arrest a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil, you're entitled to due process. You're entitled to what the Constitution gives us. And unfortunately, the Senate keeps blocking that amendment.
And you're saying that protecting an American who is accused of aiding terrorism is more important than authorizing the use of the military of the United States?
Honoring the promise I made to the men and women who elected me is my first obligation. It's what I've done every day in the Senate, is do what I said I would do.
And that's more important
And now listen,
than authorizing money for the military.
And by the way, Chris, the Defense Authorizations Acts, I'm on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Each Defense Authorization Act, I've introduced amendments that have been adopted into that bill. I have worked actively on the Defense Authorization Act. I would like to support it at the end. If they would add the protection for the civil rights of Americans, I would support it in a heartbeat. And I would note, in fact, one amendment that I introduced to the NDAA that passed into law was in December a year ago. It was an amendment mandating that the soldiers murdered at Fort Hood by Nidal Hassan would receive the Purple Heart. And the Obama Pentagon fought tooth and nail against me. And yet I was very proud to get the support of both Democrats and Republicans. We passed that legislation in December over a year ago, and last April, I was in Fort Hood when the Purple Hearts were awarded, and to each of those soldiers and their families, I simply said, thank you for your service and sacrifice, and I'm sorry it took over 5 years for your country to acknowledge that you were fighting terrorism.
Senator, you have taken some real hits for your attack this week on Donald Trump and the so-called New York values. I happen to have. I don't know if you've had a chance to see them because they were on you've been on the campaign trail. Here is the New York Post. They say Cruz missiles, and they quote Rudy Giuliani as saying that he thought that New York had gotten over this, or rather the country had gotten over this kind of knee-jerk reaction against New York. They accuse you of a sneering apology. Here is the New York Daily News. Slime doesn't pay, Ted. Your reaction?
Well, look, these are certainly amusing, and it is amusing seeing the media lead in New York and D.C. Run around with their hair on fire. At wondering what on earth are New York values. I'll tell you, in the rest of the country, people understand exactly what that is. In South Carolina, when I was there, the people there certainly understand it. And you know what is particularly...
Is responding to 9/11 part of New York values?
You know what is particularly curious, Chris? Is that formulation didn't come from me. It came from Donald Trump. Donald Trump, when he was being interviewed by Tim Russert, when he was explaining his views a number of years ago...
1999.
He explained that his views were that he was very pro-choice, he supported partial birth abortion, he was open to gay marriage, and his explanation for all of that, he said, I'm a New Yorker. I'm from Manhattan. Those are the views of New York. Those are what New York values are. They're not Iowa values, but that's New York values. And so that was Donald's own explanation of what New York values are. It's how he articulated it. And it strikes me as curious now that he is displaying such outrage. That anyone would even acknowledge that there is a particular political view. And I would point out it's a view echoed by far-left liberal Democratic politicians like Andrew Cuomo, like Bill de Blasio, like Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump has supported those candidates and supported their positions on a lot of issues.
One final question I want to ask, and as I say, we're just running out of time. You condemn the Washington cartel, which you call the lobbyists and career politicians who rigged the game. I want to ask you about one of your recent acts as a senator. You voted last month not to add money for the crop insurance program, but then you switched your vote and decided to add the money 3 minutes later. Take a look.
Mr. Cruz, no. Mr. Cruz, aye.
Senator, isn't that exactly the kind of game that the Washington cartel plays?
You know, Chris, I appreciate your passing on other campaigns' oppo hits, but that one is based on a factual mistake. In that instance, they had flipped the order of votes. And so I went up initially voting one way, believing we were voting on cloture on an issue on the Export-Import Bank. And when I voted that way, Pat Roberts made a comment about crop insurance, and I was puzzled because what I had believed I was voting on concerned the Export-Import Bank, not crop insurance. So I went back and talked to my team, said, what the heck went wrong? My team apologized to me and said, I'm sorry, would they switch the order of the votes?
Pat Roberts, who's, we should point out, is a senator from Kansas, very highly respected, chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, says that's not the way it happened, that he came up to you, tried to get you to change your vote, and explained and specifically said, this will hurt you in Iowa. That's what he says.
Pat said this is about crop insurance, and I was completely puzzled because my staff briefing had said the order of votes, and you often have a bunch of votes in the Senate, and they change the votes sometimes. And so my staff had gotten it wrong. They had briefed me on the wrong vote. And so when he said that, I said, wait a second, I didn't know I was voting on crop insurance, and the vote is open for 15 minutes. So I went back and asked, all right, what is this exactly? Oh, it's crop insurance.
But you're saying you didn't change your mind.
I didn't change my mind. It was, and we said that immediately. This is one of the sort of political games people play, where we said immediately, look, it was a mistake on our part. We misunderstood the order of the votes. And when we realized it, we corrected it and voted the way I always intended to.
Senator Cruz, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
We're going to be out in Iowa. Hope to see you on the campaign trail. And I hope to have some more time so we can talk about more subjects.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.